Greetings, I'm Sophis. Today I'll be trying out the new Deeps feature with patch 5.2 in Warhammer 3. Belegar is the one dwarf that has an upkeep malice in his campaign until he gets to Carrack 8 peaks, so I think that makes him the perfect subject to test out the Deeps. The Deeps incentivize a tall playstyle, at least in principle it does. The question is how well the buildings within it perform and if that's enough to overcome the extra upkeep that comes with his campaign. The start of the campaign is pretty standard, dealing with the minor greenskin faction in your starting province. Belegar's army is competent enough to handle those fights, even if you didn't recruit more troops. He has heroes, a solid front line, as well as rangers, so it pretty much makes his army a very all-rounder sort of starter army. I'm minimizing the casualties by trying to fight manually, even making a box formation to avoid any possible flanking. Where possible, I'm making the enemy fight uphill to maximize their disadvantage. At the end of the battle, I'm offered the Confederation with Carrack Hearn, but I refuse. We're trying to play somewhat tall, and they have a greenskin problem of their own to deal with. If they survive, they'll be easy enough to confederate on their own. We have our own issues to deal with first. Just a handful of dwarf miner units are enough to reinforce the starting army, something just to help our odds in Carrack Izor. They'll go in first on the battlefield, taking the shots from the archers and towers to preserve the strength of the dwarf warrior backline, who in turn will be covering our one unit of hammerers. Rangers will be on standby and only climb the walls in case they are secured. Belegar and the ancestor heroes join the battle on the walls. Overall, it's a pretty straightforward fight, all about wearing down the enemy with our weaker units, to then send in fresher, stronger forces. I overplayed my hand with some of the heroes and left a unit of rangers to get hit while I was distracted, but no one died, so that's a good enough result. Once the province is taken, time to double back down the mountains. Aranessa is almost done with Tilea and I can't allow that. The dilemma to start a war comes up, and given how this random event can make or break the early game, I reroll a couple times until it lands on the Pirates of Sartosa, as we'll need those grudges for the Age of Reckoning. Making it to Tilea just in time to keep it from being wiped out, now it's time to push back against Sartosa. Normally I would auto-resolve this, given we just lose a low-value unit and our enemies have a lot of armor piercing, but I'll give it an honest try. With the Vampire Coast, it's all about breaking their gun lines. Using the heroes and the dwarf miners to distract them, we rush in the rest of the forces. The most important unit to lock down are their deck gunners. The battle devolves into several smaller front lines, and the single entities take the worst of the damage, but no units get wiped out. It says Pyrrhic victory, but I disagree. Most units are in top shape, and the replenishment option takes care of the worst cases. Their main force broken, we can move on undeterred. The territory we take is then given back to Tilea for a nice sum of extra cash, and all the treaties to make them our allies. The long-term plan is to surround the starter province with a faction that has no incurred grudges. That way, the Age of Reckoning won't be as demanding. The only problem for this strategy, in Belegar's case, is that the province borders the Wood Elves, who already have quite a few and that we do not want to fight at this time. Anyway, with Aranessa dealt with for now, it's Ikit's turn before he snowballs. By the time I'm in position to take on Ikit, the Age of Reckoning triggers and a Grudge Settler army comes in. I throw it at Ikit as a sacrifice, and like that we've dealt a blow to their main force. I really try to avoid fighting Clan Scryer manually, given they have the Warpstone nuke, so it's really worth the Pyrrhic auto-resolve. Now it's a matter of sweeping what's left, taking Skavenblight and Tobaro. Thanks to Morgur, those were Ikit's only settlements, so the rat infestation is dealt with decisively. While the main force is off dealing with that, a minor faction of beastmen attack prematurely a very small force I had assembled to deal with them. Despite being vastly outnumbered, a little bit of positioning and accounting for the Slayer Lord being unbreakable lets me work out a heroic victory. This small army will be dealing with problems up north and trying to get us more grudges settled, whilst Belegar finishes off Sartosa for good. Noticing Black Venom was reduced down to a single fort settlement that was already weakened, I launch an attack with the small army. It won't give us much, but 130 grudges are 130 grudges. The battle is pretty standard. The catapults break the enemy tower. Then the Quarrelers weaken their infantry inside the walls. Next up, the Slayer breaks down the main gate and we use him alongside that opening to give the Iron Drakes a kill box. Once they stop defending the main gate, I lure them to the victory point ahead, where I do the same strategy. For such a limited force, each unit fulfills a key role and shows how good the Grudge Settler variants are. By this point, I have the Deeps up and running on Karak Izor. The building that gives percentile income increase still isn't up, however, but our economy is doing well between keeping our secondary army small and the funding we've got from Tilea. Just in time, I take Sartosa and finish the war with Aranessa, as over the end turn Scrag declares war. Unfortunately, I can't sell Sartosa to Tilea, so I'll just leave it as is. If someone takes it, raises it, or sacks it, it doesn't matter. Scrag sends both his armies face first into dwarf garrisons with emergency armies, which lets me go right for his territories taken from the border princes. This time around, the Age of Reckoning only gets filled up to 50%, as our biggest grudges lie to the east, and Scrag isn't giving many of them. The best thing to do is to keep selling territories to Tilea so they protect our borders from being shared with too many enemies. The Deeps are starting to churn out money, but it isn't enough yet to really improve the income. I'm still scraping by. Now that we're closing in on 8 peaks, there's a bit of bad news. Thorgrim has done such a good job that he has already taken the whole region. That will complicate matters. But on the upside, there's more time to see just how well the Deeps work with the economy. Confederating Thorgrim will take a whole lot of settled grudges, given his relative strength. Carrick Hearn accepted Confederation, and with Black Venom dealt with, there's no issue in getting this province, as it is surrounded by allied and friendly factions. Another bit of territory we can start taking over are the Badlands. While I could try to make use of Wurzag and Queek as means to weaken Thorgrim and possibly take 8 peaks from him, I still need grudges fulfilled to keep the Age of Reckoning going, so to war we go. I'd say that so far, while it seems that you can slow down to some amount thanks to the Deeps, the Age of Reckoning requirements still keep you fairly aggressive. Playing tall is possible, but it doesn't seem compatible with attaining 100% most of the time on those Ages of Reckoning. What is starting to become noticeable, however, is that although I am running multiple armies, even with the upkeep malice, I am still in the green, and more than that, it's improving each turn. By turn 40, we're looking at a significantly boosted income at Karak Izor, with almost 900 extra gold coming from the Deeps on top of that. Checking on the Great Book of Grudges, it looks like I'm very far from the target amount to get Thorgrim, but there are quite a few things I can do in the long term to get there. I still haven't done either of Belegar's quest battles yet, and there are some valuable targets out in the Badlands. Wurzag is at war with Queek, so I can take this opportunity to do a little bit of helping. Queek attacks Wurzag's settlement and my armies come in to assist. With the garrison so beat up, it's a matter of time until they lose, but I make use of this time wisely, aiming my artillery fire towards Queek's forces, trying to get rid of valuable units like his catapults. His forces arrived from multiple fronts and mine were split, so I couldn't do as much damage as I wanted, but better than nothing. Next turn I catch Queek at a vulnerable position, and down he goes, giving me plenty of settled grudges. By this point, it's abundantly clear to me he isn't going to deal any significant damage to Thorgrim, so the best thing to do with his territory is to take over. Despite catching him, this next Age of Reckoning falls short of 100%. Now, something to consider is that I am conquering a lot more territory than I was at the beginning of the campaign. Given the building I have at the Deeps, expanding too quickly should be a problem. However, the text says the building gives out a 5% improvement per turn counter and takes off 5% per owned settlements. Given my amount of settlements is well below the turn counter, this isn't really a problem. Even taking over Queek settlements, the income just keeps going up. Keep in mind, we're 47 turns in, with 10,000 gold in army upkeep, and we are still keeping our economy well in the green. I know this isn't legendary difficulty, but even if we account for that, the income will still be quite profitable for a faction that is supposed to be punished with a 50% more upkeep. and it just keeps getting higher and higher. The Oath Gold income is also through the roof. This lets me keep a steadily growing military force, and Belegar's skills allow very fast global recruitment, so we're starting to snowball quite a bit. Almost 20 turns later, I'm getting close to being able to confederate Thorgrim. Really close. Like really close. Seriously, one grudge? I've got Skarsnik on the ropes, and it all comes down to one final small battle, to both get the few grudges left for Confederation and to achieve short campaign victory. It's a minor settlement battle, and by this point I'm feeling overconfident, this close to the finish line. It's practically a formality, as I could have also resolved it with no issue, so I start getting careless. Still, Belegar and the Ancestor Spirits are a force to be reckoned with on their own, so there's no real danger. It's only slightly annoying that I have to deal with night goblins and their stalking. Aside from taking more damage than I should, it's a victory. Short campaign victory, and now I confederate Thorgrim. And even with his armies and settlements, the income jumps up. Carrick 8 Peaks is ours. And by this point, I think it's realistic to say there's no losing, even if I raise the campaign difficulty. So, my thoughts on the Deeps are that it is a fun feature and very strong. However, it may need some tweaking to really be the intended means of playing tall, with less territory. Even considering Belegar's malice, and even when the amount of settlements kept ramping up, I didn't feel at any point that I was punished for the sudden growth. That said, the mechanics of it are very enjoyable, flavorful, and strategic. I like seeing free updates like this to Warhammer 3, and it just feels like it needs a nudge to make it more balanced. But that's all I have for you today. I hope you're having a good day, and until next time.